this episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Welcome, Therapy Bites Art Labbers, to another episode of the podcast. Glad that you're here on the Therapy Bites podcast. And we often get questions about communication. What is it about communication that can cause a relationship to rise to the occasion, even in the most difficult situations, circumstances, or can really sink it? And today we're going to be talking about listening fast versus listening deep. The psychology of communication. Join us coming up next.
Welcome to Therapy Bites Art Lab, where Dr. Heath and his special guests share real-life stories of helping and healing, fresh from the actual therapy couch, while taking a bite out of common counseling missteps and misconceptions. And now, here's Heath and the TBAL Team.
There's different types of communication. There's different types of communication tools. There's different purposes for communication. We're going to talk about all of that today. And we've divided that into, or bifurcated that into two types: listening fast versus listening deep. And you cannot do both simultaneously. For instance, I remember a story that Stephen Covey told. What is the most kind, considerate way that you could respond to somebody who approaches you in the parking lot of, say, Walmart, and the question is, where's the bathroom? Well, instead of talking deeply about all of the philosophy of bathrooms, or where that came from, and the history of bathrooms, and by the way, I have 2 bathrooms, you might have 3, and the reasons you have 2 or 3. What's the most kind, considerate thing Stephen Covey, author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said? He said the most kind, considerate thing is to point and say, that way. That way. Now that is communicating fast, but it's not communicating deeply. When your house is on fire and you want to solve a survival problem, you might want to communicate fast, which tends to be pretty superficial. But here's the question, and I often say it's a big but. Lots of us here have big butts. And this is a big but. The but is, how do you define crisis and how do you define survival mode? It is a mistake in your relationship to program your brain to believe that everything, your survival is dependent on everything you want or everything that you desire. And what have you ladies found as far as, your clinical work with patients? I think Debbie mentioned catastrophizing, mind reading, fortune telling. I know that certainly can sabotage and has sabotaged my own relationship. I'm not a hypocrite here. I experienced some of these same difficulties. I just know how to look for them.
I know sometimes, one of the things I have to watch for in my own self is mind reading, is in both directions, assuming that I know what my husband is thinking, or assuming that he should know what I'm thinking. I hear a lot of people, I've heard it many times, well, we've been together for X amount of years, he should know what I think, he should know what I want, he should know what to do. And that's just simply not the case. Nobody knows unless we make our need known. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. And I've heard that a lot too, and I myself have done that. But I think kind of going back to the 2 different topics, listening fast versus listening deep, something I like to tell clients along that same line is, trying to listen to understand than to just respond. Yes. When we're listening to respond, all we're focused on is what we're going to say next, and we're missing out on the whole back half of the conversation. And by the time the person we're talking to is finished, they may have completely changed, what they started off saying. So we're responding based on very limited information that we have. And it results in a lot of miscommunication.
I have a quick pro tip for that, because I think we all tend to do that. Get your pens, pieces of paper out if you're not driving. If you're driving, don't do that. Just replay the episode. Yes. There's actually a really neat little button on your podcast player where you can rewind, you can save it, you can go back and listen to it multiple times. Don't do this while you're driving. But my quick tip is Instead of thinking about a statement to say next, think of a question to ask next. Instead of what am I going to say, how am I going to reload and respond? Because often that's what we're doing, and we're not really thinking about what the person's saying. We're just reloading. Instead of reloading with a statement, well, let me tell you a thing or two. Ask better questions. And what should that question be about? The question should be about what the person just said. Think of it as a psychological shovel. A person that just handed you a pile of information. Now it's time to shovel through it. Or maybe a better metaphor would be sifting for gold. If you watched old westerns and the gold rush of California, you'll see that they use these little shakers that had a screen on it, and you can start screening out for some of the most valuable things about which to ask a question. You can take notes while someone is talking, and then you can review those notes and ask a question to further sift into their psyche. This helps you listen more deeply. And guess what? As in everything, basketball, golf, shuffleboard, darts, the more you work at it or the more you practice it, the better you get at it. The more you train yourself to listen by sifting through what people are saying and pulling out those valuable nuggets and asking questions about those valuable nuggets, you become a world-class, top-notch, platinum-level listener instead of just somebody, taking bat and taking swings at what others are saying. Listen to ask questions instead of listening to reload. How do you guys enter your conversations with those that you love? I mean, how do you get out of the habit of just there's 4 things we do, by the way. You can write these down. We'll address those later. But we can deny, dismiss, deflect, and defend. And those 4 deadly D's will sink your relationship.
Yeah.
Because you're listening fast in order to defend, or you're listening fast in order to dismiss, or you're listening fast, dismiss is, oh, that's just silly. That's dismissing. Deflecting, someone calls you a doo-doo head. Well, you're a bigger doo-doo head. No, you're a bigger doo-doo head. No, you were a doo-doo head first. No, you've been a doo-doo head longer. And all of a sudden, we're back in 1st or 2nd grade, aren't we? Yeah. Deflecting never works. Defending, as if you're sitting on the witness stand, and there's nothing to defend. You're not in court, and get rid of those dismiss, deflect, deny. Oh, deny. That just simply is not true. You're standing on my foot. I most certainly am not. You're gaslighting. By the way, gaslighting is just another way of engaging in the 4 Ds. And instead of doing that, set those aside and ask a question. What are some techniques you guys use in your personal relationships?
I think for me, the first thing that I had to do is recognize that that's what I was doing. I had to recognize it for what it was and identify it. And it took practice and time to change that around. And I think when you come at it from a mindfulness perspective, that's that approaching situations with curiosity instead of judgment, instead of coming into that with, like you said, the deny or the, well, you're wrong, or that didn't happen, or you're not standing on my foot. That's all judgment. But the curiosity is more, I wonder what's going on here, and ask good questions and dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
But
and kind of to bounce off of that, I was kind of thinking the mindfulness route too, but also being present during the conversation.
Yes.
So not thinking about what I'm going to do next, or thinking about, what happened in the past, focusing on, okay, what is this person actually saying to me right now? And really focusing on having that conversation. Because almost like, listening fast, it's also harmful to listen but not listen. So what I mean by that is I'm listening to you, or I'm hearing you, but I'm thinking about what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes. And so I've completely missed, part of it. Maybe I've got little bits and pieces of the conversation, and maybe that's where I get defensive because I misheard or I misunderstood something. But if I can stay present in the conversation and be there with the person, I found that really helps me a lot too.
I'm glad to hear Sarah say or indicate about missing parts of the conversation, because we just had a discussion in the art lab about a psychology professor. We won't call their name. We're much too kind for that. Actually, we're not, but we're still not going to call their name. But the discussion was about a psychology professor that said, what, Debbie? What was their take on PTSD and memory?
The Therapy Bites podcast is HIPAA compliant. No identifying patient information will be disclosed by Therapy Bites podcast hosts or Therapy Bites podcast guests without permission from patients or guardians. All personal stories are de-identified in order to comply with HIPAA, the NASW Code of Ethics, and the ethical principles of psychologists and Code of Conduct. Fresh from the therapy couch and from the deep dark recesses, stories may involve exploding preconceived notions and topics uncomfortable to underthinkers and small farm animals. Audience discretion and duct taping your head for safety is advised. Concrete-headed Kool-Aid drinking humans assume all risks associated with any possibility of choking to death on the accurate, realistic thoughts presented in the art lab. This is natural selection, and Therapy Bites podcast management and hosts are not responsible.
This is Doc Heath with Therapy Duck. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this little yellow duck. He's got a helicopter helmet on, and we're going to helicopter into the deep, dark depths beneath the psychotherapy couch to talk about one of the most disabling words in the English language, can't. We have patients all the time talk about, I can't do this, I can't think that way, I can't take this, I can't stand that. And as our psychotherapy associate clinician Sarah says, if you just remove the apostrophe T, it turns it to a can. This is Doc Heath and Therapy Duck encouraging you to helicopter your way out from beneath those deep dark recesses, remove the apostrophe T, and turn all your can'ts into cans. We look forward to your success. Share them, celebrate them in the comments. We always love hearing from you guys. We'll catch you next time on the deep, dark depths from beneath the therapy couch.
You're listening to Therapy Bites Art Lab, bite-sized therapy for your brain with Dr. Heath and the TBAL Team. The best advice on the net. No copay required.
You're slipping beneath the cushions of your bobble-headed psychotherapist's couch, leaving behind empty, echoing, cushy, comforting, pseudo-psychological claptrap, moving into a deeper dimension of your own mind, where distorted thinking, hurting, hopelessness, and regret evaporate into clarity, healing, renewed hope, and newfound resilience. That's the podcast sign up ahead. Your next stop, Therapy Bites Psych Secrets.
This is the anonymous psychotherapist with today's Psych Secrets, and it is on irrational fears. People in my profession typically talk about irrational fears. There's no such thing as an irrational fear or an irrational anxiety or irrational anger, because emotions are neither rational nor irrational. Look behind the emotion, see what's really going on, and you'll see what's really going on is a thought process. It is your thought process, which may be rational or irrational, but it is your thought process which is creating a fear. It is your thought process that is creating a anxiety. The next time you hear the nonsense about irrational fears, know that that's not what's going on. Change your thinking and change your life. This is the anonymous psychotherapist with today's Psych Secrets.
Once again, Doc Heath rips the cushions from the couch, dishes the dirt, lets the cat out of the bag, uncorks the bottle, letting the genie escape, and blows the lid off of another of the universe's Psych Secrets.
Here's Heath and the TBAL Team.
That when you experience a flashback, what happens is you actually see the person or the situation or whatever the trauma was. You have to visualize it, see it like it's right there happening again.
And I think you used the word, we see it exactly as it happened.
Exactly as it happened. Yes.
Listen up. That is totally inaccurate. It's inaccurate with PTSD. You do not recreate things like Memorex. I'm dating myself. There used to be a commercial. Is it live or is it Memorex? It's never, ever Memorex with PTSD. You're not remembering it exactly. But guess what? It's not that anytime, anywhere in life. The brain simply, it's not that it does not work that way. It cannot work that way, and you don't want it to work that way. The reason you don't want it to work that way is your brain would be a garbage dump. I mean, your brain would store the angle of tilt of the person's head and the decibel level, and if their shoe was untied on the left foot and not the right, and the direction of the sun rising or setting, and how many clouds in the sky, and how many freckles on their face, and was their hair brushed to the left or to the right, and did they have a hat on, and at what angle was the hat crooked. I mean, your brain simply does not need all those details or it becomes a garbage dump. Therefore, the point I'm getting at, and by the way, this goes back to my favorite high-value target, the ridiculous pseudo-psychological Kool-Aid drinking meme called gaslighting, is your brain does not store that much data that you are always that accurate. For goodness sakes alive, I'm not always that accurate. We fallible human beings have a fallible perception. And relationships are all about sharing and valuing each other's perceptions. And I had a person on social media ask me the other day, but what if they really are engaged in some sort of devious plan and they want you to think they're crazy? Why would I consent to that? Well, Doc Heath, I think you're absolutely wrong, because you and I were kidnapped by aliens yesterday, and you know it and I know it. I would respond to that with curiosity. Gosh, I got nothing. I don't seem to remember the intrusive anal probe. I just don't, and I don't seem to have a resulting hemorrhoid, and I don't have pain in that particular area, and I don't remember having been at a party with aliens that night and saying, "Hey, anybody got an anal probe available?" I just don't remember that. It's interesting that you do. And I get to choose what to believe and what not to believe. But what am I going to do if I value that relationship? And you don't have to value that relationship. But if it is a relationship you value, I would recommend, going back to what we spoke of earlier, ask questions. Ask questions. Did you see the anal probe? What color was it? And we want to keep the show friendly. I won't get much deeper with that. Deeper, no pun intended. But my point is, people can say all kinds of nutty, Fruit Loopy things, and you can take it personal, or you can ask questions. You say, "I'm a doo-doo head." Gosh, I don't know. In what way? Can you call that to my attention next time? I'll try to be less of a doo-doo head. Now, I know some of you are thinking, gosh, there'll be people calling your attention to that from daylight to dark, But my point is, approach these conversations with curiosity versus the other way is thinking that they're a threat to you. Going back to the famed philosopher King Marcus Aurelius, what is it that people are doing during a conversation? They are passing air through their lips. It's air set in motion. How can air, no matter what their intent is, which you would have to infer if you're saying they're gaslighting, manipulating, controlling, whatever, how can air passing through someone's teeth and lips be a threat to you? I choose that that's not a threat, and I approach it with curiosity. Do you guys ever have people in relationships with you personally that they say things you don't prefer. Does that ever happen? That's rhetorical, I guess,
Oh,
right?
never.
Never happen. People always say only what you prefer.
Oh man.
Wow.
Only what you prefer. How do you respond to it when they do say things you don't prefer?
That's an excellent question. I think for me it depends on the person, and it shouldn't. It really shouldn't. Keep that in mind, listeners. It shouldn't matter who the person is. But for me, if it's somebody that I'm really close to, I'm more likely to take it in a way where I believe it, whether it's true or not. And then I have to go back and really think about it and think, wait, was that actually accurate? Or were they maybe just in a
Yes,
bad
you're
mood?
looking at the evidence, aren't
Yes,
you?
exactly.
Yeah, they're
Exactly.
telling you the aliens kidnapped you. You're looking for the evidence.
Right, right. And then a lot of times if I go back and talk to the person about it again, obviously we're talking about healthy thinking people, but they'll be like, well, no, that's not actually what I meant. Or they'll apologize and say, I had stubbed my toe, or I had had a bad day at work, and it really had nothing to do with you. It was more about me than it was about you. So.
Yeah, and you did say that was later.
Right.
In other words, you let later happen, and in the later, when you got to the later, you actually restructured your thinking.
Right.
Don't base your relationship on something that happens in the moment. You know why? Because here's another moment. Oh, there's another one. Oh, another moment just happened. Oh, we got moments popping up all over the place in the art lab. What will we do? There's always another moment. Don't base your conclusions in your relationship. Don't sacrifice the future of your relationship on the present moment. Be curious, ask questions about it. Get into, instead of, listening fast, like you're always in a crisis, listen deeply. Where might this be coming from? I mean, I wasn't kidnapped by an alien and had the whole anal probe ordeal, but maybe they were. Or maybe they just have a hemorrhoid. Or they're constipated. It seems quite narcissistic for me to make everything about me. Oh, they're gaslighting me. Well, how narcissistic is that? Maybe they're just doing it. Maybe it's a habit. I mean, I think we'd all agree that it's unhealthy to walk around telling people, well, you're just crazy. But it's also unhealthy to think all that is about you, dear listener. It's not about you. What people say really has much more to do with them than it does about you. And it's up to you. The last and greatest of all things, as Viktor Frankl said, is the power to choose our own way, and among those is the power to choose our own thinking. Listen fast if you need safety-related information. Bathrooms that way. There's a fire. Call 911. Hit the brakes. Stop. You're about to step off a cliff. If you're just relaying information, listen fast and relay it quickly. But relationships require listening deeper, and that takes time. What's a quick tip as we close out the episode today that you recommend folks put some shoe leather on in their own lives and give it a try as soon as they get done listening to this episode?
Ooh, absolutely. So actually, I've been thinking about this while we've been talking about it. Give me a second, but it reminds me of this guy right here. Whoop.
And she's pointing up at a little gnat that has a compass. And the compass has 4 directions. And what are those directions?
Let's see. We've got happy. We've got, it's backwards, angry. We've got, what does that say? Afraid. And we've got
happy
sad.
is north.
Yep.
And afraid is to the west. Running away to the west. And angry is running to the east. And sad is running to the south.
Yes.
Meaning, if you're being dictated by emotional reasoning, happy means go north, young man or young woman. And if you're afraid, go south. But then again, what's the point there, Sarah? What's that trying to teach us?
The point is, yeah, absolutely. Don't make decisions based off your emotions, okay? So if you're anxious, that doesn't mean that you have to do something about it. It doesn't mean if I'm anxious, well, that means I'm in danger. That means this is a bad conversation. That means I have to get out of it. No. If you're anxious, be curious about it. Well, I wonder why I'm anxious. But keep going with whatever the conversation is. Keep doing what you need to do. Don't let that emotion determine what you do.
I am always anxious when I'm having a conversation with my wife, especially if she has a big iron skillet in her hand. But if she's putting eggs in them, I think, well, this is okay. I'm anxious. We're having a difficult conversation. I'm about to have some eggs over easy. Now, it'd be different if she had it leveraged, angled over the top of my skull. That would not be a good thing. But Sarah makes a great point. Discomfort does not equal danger. And the sooner you disconnect those two, the better off your relationships will be. Just a quick recap. Get the 4 deadly D's out of your communication in your relationship. Denying that just didn't happen. Instead, listen to ask better questions. Dismissing, oh, that's just silly. How silly is that? Instead of dismissing, listen, ask better questions. Deflecting, well, I may be a doo-doo head, but you're a worse doo-doo head. No, you're a bigger doo-doo head. That's deflecting. That's deflecting. And you can get that D out of your relationship and ask better questions. And defending, hey guys, this isn't court. If you want your relationship to stay out of court, stop engaging in the 4 Ds, and instead of listening fast, take a breath and listen deeper. In your relationship, one of the best things you can do during your communication, I'm going to do it right now, listen, is breathe, and then breathe again. And take another breath after that one. See, those are 3 nice, nutritious breaths, and they're nutritious for your relationship. Catch us next time on Therapy Bites Art Lab. Thank you guys for being with us. Bye-bye. Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Individual psychological concepts are very different animals from one another. And while they are often readily observable in the wild, the Therapy Bites Art Lab Zoo affords us a unique opportunity to study them in a safe and controlled environment. Welcome to the Therapy Bites Art Lab Creature Feature. Oh, good heavens!
Hey you. Yeah, you. Have you seen him? Have you seen him anywhere around? He's a red ant with a flamethrower. He's about 2 inches tall. He makes everything worse. He turns every situation into a catastrophe. Huh? You haven't seen him? What do you mean you haven't seen him? Oh, that's okay. Because today's creature feature is about that ant. And ant stands for automatic negative thought. So, this, on my right, and for y'all listening to the audio, I have a red ant with a flamethrower on my right. This is the catastrophizing ant. To this ant, every situation, no matter how big or small, is a catastrophe. It could be something as simple as going to the store to buy milk. This little fella right here, this catastrophizing ant, is going to think of all the ways it could go wrong. He's going to think of, well, what if I bump into so-and-so and I don't want to talk to them? Or what if they don't have the right kind of milk? Or what if the person is stocking the milk as I'm going to get it and they're in the way and I have to ask them and da-da-da-da-da-da. He just tries to think of all the ways it could go wrong, but he doesn't think about any of the ways things could go right. And he also doesn't take into account that he doesn't know what's going to happen. So, when you have this little fella, this catastrophizing ant in your noggin, boop boop up here, what I want you to do is I want you to practice accurate, realistic thinking. So what is the evidence that everything is going to go wrong? Because this guy, he doesn't care about the evidence, but you should. So don't listen to the catastrophizing ant. Figure out what the evidence is that things are going to go so catastrophically. And I think you'll find 99.9% of the time, things are not going to be nearly as bad as you think they're going to be. All right? Practice that accurate, realistic thinking and those life-affirming beliefs. Catch you next time, T-ballers.
Thank you for joining us for the Therapy Bites Art Lab Creature Feature.
Hey, T-ballers. Thanks so much for being with us today. If we brought value to your day, show us some love by leaving your positive feedback and inviting some friends to listen in and join the T-ball team. Next time on Therapy Bites Art Lab.
We're here with Austin Wheeler today at the Art Lab talking about the psychology of strength. What does it mean to be a strong person? For that matter, what does it mean to be a weak person? Where does that come from and how can you develop? That's coming up next.
Government legal gobbledygook. Therapy Bites is not intended as a diagnostic or as an alternative to professional clinical treatment. Resources and advice are for information and entertainment purposes only. Brought to you by someone saying things you don't like? Tape that nagging loudmouth shut. Government-approved speech tape. Gas tape. Now available at your local hardware store. Therapy Bites Art Lab is not an approved, endorsed, authorized, butt-kissing affiliate of the United States Special Offense Assessment Police. SOAP for short. Warning. Consumption of Therapy Bites Art Lab content by Kool-Aid drinking, stinking, thinking, social media, pseudo-psychological pushing, wacky woke anti-free speech mumbo-jumbo advocates may cause spontaneous internal skull combustion, stomach discomfort, and or laxative effects. Allergy warning. Therapy Bites is manufactured in a facility that challenges nutty distortions, processes nuggets of accurate, realistic thinking, and life-affirming beliefs. This is the audio version of the legal fine print. Why are you still listening to this when you can catch the next great episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab with a good friend or family member? Really? Are you still there? This is getting silly. Move on to the next psychologically thrilling episode of the best advice on the net. No copay required.
Me eat copay.
Yeah, with Dr. Heath and the TBAL Team. Go ahead, don't be podgoraphobic. Scoot, scoot, scoot. On to the next episode.